Hello students, in this video we are going to do the explanation of chapter 13 of your history, and that is the United Nations. In this we will be doing the various organs of United Nations as well. So let's quickly begin with the explanation of chapter 13. So you can say after the bitter experience of two different world wars, it was finally the world came into a particular state of mind that they wanted an organization which should work for establishing the peace situation in the world scenario, and that is why they came up with this particular organization called as the United Nations Organization for Peace. The efforts of all these countries finally took shape in San Francisco on October 24, 1945, and then the UNO was formed. Now, first of all, we'll do the reasons for the establishment of the United Nations. The most important reason is obviously the disastrous World War. It was like the worst effect of the World War was on the peace of the countries. Then besides that, it was death, destruction, commotion, and life became almost like a hell. Therefore, to come out of the situation, every nation desired that now they want peace from the wars, and they do not want any such war to happen in the near future. As a result, this particular organization was much desired. Next, we see the failure of the League of Nations. League of Nations was earlier built an organization for the same purpose after the First World War, but as it was not, you can say, effective enough, or maybe the big countries were not joining it and taking active participation in it, or for their particular reasons they were apprehensive and they did not actively took part in the decisions or sanctions which were passed by the League of Nations against any of the perpetrators who were creating disputes and, you can say, breaking out the peace treaties and peace of the country. No actions were taken there, and that ultimately led to the Second World War. So learning from that, they desired that now more effective organization has to be made and more active participation with all the member countries have to be taken. And with that particular result, they decided that the new formation, that is the United Nations Organization, will have the superpowers, the big powers, the main influential countries, all of them actively taking part in it, and nearly every second country which was desiring peace was supposed to be a member of this organization. Another important reason why they thought that they require United Nations organization was the you can say a particular fear that another such war might take place, and that is the Third World War. They thought for no particular reason it was the Second World War started and everybody got into it, and as they jumped, the disaster was on a you can say mammoth proportion. So that is why, to avoid all such disaster and futile wars and no reasons for the death and destruction, and the fear of the Third World War was that this time the weapons will be even more disastrous and deadly, lethal weapons, and every particular nation will try to overcome the other nation in terms of power and ammunitions and arms. And that is why it was decided that now onwards, if any particular such war situation arises and a Third World War happens, it will be disastrous for the entire planet. So that is why they wanted the Third World War should not happen, and that can be done only when there is a particular organization which would check all such disputes in the beginning only. That means nip it in the bud. Next, we have division of the world into two power blocks. Now we see during the Second World War, initially it was the First World War, it was the USA as well as the USSR. They were all together. But later onwards, we see that USA and USSR, they turned against each other because they wanted to prove themselves mightier than the other, and the superpower competition happened, because of which some of the countries, they joined USA, whereas the other countries, they joined USSR, and that is Russia. And that is how the entire world was divided into two power blocks, one on the side of USA, one on the side of the USSR. And it seemed as if any day a particular dispute arises, a spark arises, and the war begins, all the nations on these two sides of the power blocks would get into fight. So To avoid that, it was very important that a organization should be made like a referee to stop the competition becoming lethal and disastrous between the two superpowers. We know that India was not a power, not on the side of any of these power blocks, and it formed a third group of all those countries which did not want to get into any of the power block game. They were the non-aligned. That means they are not going to align in any of the groups. India was the one which is considered to be the beginner or founder of the NAM, non-aligned movement, but that is for later. Here we see destructive weapons. As I told you, another important reason was earlier the Second World War ended with the atomic bombs, and now they knew that the bombs and the missiles and the arms will be even more deadlier than this atomic bomb. This atomic bomb had the capability of swiping off the entire city, and now they felt that it could be even lethal weapons which can be made even more, because that is why disarmament was brought into action, so that the nations do not come up with weapons which might even swipe off the entire country or even the planet itself. So that was the reason why disarmament policy was to be followed, and that could be done only when one particular group can force it onto all the other countries, disputing countries or any country, and can check their working. And this could be an organization of the world level where nearly all the countries of the world be a member of it, and then collectively they can take decisions for or against any particular issue that arises later onwards. So that is why we see United Nations was established. Next we see origin of the UN. When we talk about origin of the UN, we simply talk about the Second World War and the war scenarios and after that situation. So here we see, while the war was continuing, the leaders of the allied governments, allied, remember, US, France, Britain and USSR, they all met together. They realized that the potential danger of wars on the humanity can be even worse. They held discussions and then finally led the foundation of the UN. The text for the UN Charter was drafted at San Francisco Conference. It was in June 1945, and at that time this charter was signed by 50 participating nations. That means 50 nations were in favor of this, and they signed this particular charter, the rules and regulations of this organization called UN. The United Nations then finally, from June, it was all drafted and everything was worked out properly, and finally in October, that is around on 24th of October, it took a final shape and came as a legally formed organization at the world level. And when the charter was ratified by 29 nations including 5 permanent members of the Security Council, then it came into being as an official body. Since then, October 24 is celebrated as the United Nations Day. So it might be asked to you which date is celebrated as United Nations Day. You should be clear about it. It is 24th of October. What were the main objectives of the United Nations? So here when we are talking about the objectives, first of all, obviously it was supposed to maintain international peace and security so that no such war and disputes arise which might lead to other such third world war. To develop friendly relations among the nations, because nations were so much hostile to each other, there were hardly any friendly relations left between the nations, or hardly any good relations between the countries. So to maintain peace, everything was important only when the trust building was done and the countries once again get into friendly relations, friendly alliance rather than military alliances. To achieve international cooperation and solving international economic, social, cultural and humanitarian problems. So the main reason was that all the nations together work for the threat which are globally for all the nations or for a major part of the world, and then collectively they can take part, because those things can even affect directly or indirectly to everyone. So such things can be taken care of and can be looked after, can be, you can say, even the problems can be solved with the collective efforts, and that can be once it is your turn, the other time it might be somebody else's turn to be on the helping side, and sometimes of being on the victim side. So that is how they were supposed to help each other, maintaining with proper situations with cooperation, helping out, solving out the problems. Then fourth is to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations. to have proper help given, to have proper support, proper solutions to be done. All the nations cannot just come and sit at one any particular place. They need to have a particular common ground where all of them can get down to a particular discussion. For that discussion, that particular common ground was the organization, United Nations organization. And it is not an organization of any particular country. It is basically an organization of all the countries. There might be permanent members, there might be other members which are not permanent, but all these nations have a common ground, and that is your United Nations organization, which help them to discuss all such problems. Important thing that we have about the principles of United Nations, it has certain principles that it has to follow, and that is to respect the sovereign equality of all its members. It cannot be bigger members or stronger members, countries given more privileges or more importance, and their discussions or their thoughts to be valued, and then smaller nations to be ignored. No, it is not that. Each member is supposed to be equally treated and given equal sovereign equality. All members should fulfill in good faith the obligations they are expected to be doing for the as a member of the organization. They should settle disputes with peaceful means. It is not that okay, some particular one country is going to be creating nuisance, so they ask all the nations to attack on that. It has to be proper negotiations and proper peaceful way. It cannot be that a peace organization asking other nations to attack a particular nation, because that is creating some dispute. So that is why the disputes have to be properly negotiated, and with proper power and force they should be solved, but that force should not be the force of military. Next is they would refrain from the threat or use of force against any state. That is what I said, not forcing anyone with the military power, with attacks, with wars, nothing. It has to be proper negotiation, and people, the countries or the nations, pressurizing them in a different manner through negotiations, to trying to convince them through the talks. They should give the United Nations every assistance and any assistance in any action it takes. So when a particular nation is when there is a particular problem and United Nations is taking an action against it, so it is expected that all the members of the UNO, they should help that particular organization to properly work or implement the decisions or actions they want to, and that can be done. That is considered to be a good action, because it will be only after the discussion of all the members. So it cannot be that all the members are against it and UN is still performing any action like that. It has to be their discussion, their decision, and then their support in implementing that particular decision. Next we see United Nations shall intervene in the domestic shall not intervene in the domestic or internal affairs of any state. Any state means any country, any member state, member country. It should not be interfering it if the matter is serious, grave, and it is like talking about the fundamental rights violation, or maybe taking a particular problem which deals with the entire world scenario. Then only the UN will intervene. Otherwise UN will not intervene in the personal matters of any particular country, unless and until that country asks or seeks for help. Headquarters, these are the important topics of the chapter that you should be learning. Just one word answers, you can learn them by heart. Headquarters, you can say all organs of UN are based in New York, that is USA, except the ICJ, that is International Court of Justice. That is not in USA, that is in Hague, Netherlands. Otherwise rest all the organs are in New York, USA. The flag, when we talk about the flag, it is blue in color, light blue in color, and portrayed in white. At its center is the UN emblem. What is the UN emblem? It is the world map from the Arctic region, and over there it is a twin olive leaf branches on the covering it from bottom to the sides, and that is the United Nations emblem, which was adopted on October 20, 1947. So I have explained you the entire emblem. You can even go through the net and see that particular picture. It is even given in your books, but that is in black and white, so you can have a proper idea of this. Besides that, other official languages, we cannot say that it is an organization of one nation or one language speaking nation. It is an organization of several nations. Therefore the official languages are also several. There are 6 of them, and they are Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. Why are these six used as official languages? Because maximum number of people usually speak these languages and they are far away from each other, so that means they cover up the entire part of the entire area of the world. Arabic in the Middle East, English in most of the nations, Chinese have a vast area in Asia, Russia also, and then Spanish in the entire Europe. And besides that, French is also one of the common languages, Spanish and French in Europe as well as in Latin American countries as well. So that is how we can say these are the languages which are commonly spoken and are basically official languages. But at times there are other languages. Many of these languages are translated into 5 languages, but documents are written only in the English and French. So those are the official writing languages, but officially you can speak up your problems in these 6 languages. Finances. The expenditure of United Nations is all by the contributions, or you can say donations, made by the member states or member countries from time to time. Membership. Membership of UN is open to all peace-loving nations. Any nation can be a member of it, which is ready to abide by the principles of UN and accept the obligations of the UN Charter. 50 countries who took part in the San Francisco conference and signed the Charter became the original members of UN. Other countries are admitted by General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. General Assembly, Security Council, they are all organs of the UN and they decide which member from time to time is to be included in the group. Almost all the countries in the world are its members now, and around 2011 there were 193 countries which were members of the UN, and the last country to be admitted in the UN is South Sudan. It might be asked in your questions as short answer type question, which is the last country included as a member of UN. So you can write as per 2011 records, it is South Sudan. India, an original member. Now remember, 1945 was the time when India was not an independent country, yet it is one of the countries which were original members of UN. So here it's interesting. India was one of the 50 members who took part in San Francisco conference, because it was quite understood, considered that India sooner or later is going to get independence. British is not going to stay any longer. That is why India was given a chance to give their representatives in this conference, and Jawaharlal Nehru was the one who went into this particular organization. As an original member of UN, India has been in the forefront of all the UN peacekeeping endeavors and has sent troops to Africa and other parts of the world as a part of UN peacekeeping movement. So every time whenever required, India has been sending help, and that can be in manpower, that can be in finances or resources or in any other such ways. Then we move on to the second part of the chapter. We'll just do the headings, and about them in detail we'll do in the next module. So there are 6 different organs of the United Nations organization. We'll name them properly and then later we'll do them in detail. First is the General Assembly. Maximum all the members are supposed to be members of this group. Then the Security Council. Then comes the International Court of Justice. You know, that is the judiciary part, obviously. Economic and Social Council, talking about the resources and heritages. The Trusteeship Council, and lastly the Secretariat. So here these are the 6 different organs of the UN that we'll be doing in the later part of this chapter. So for today we'll end up over here with the names of 6 different organs of the UN. I hope you've understood it. Kindly go through this again and do read it in your books as well.